Greetings, travelers, and welcome to part 2 of my top 50 favorite horror films. Just like last time, in honor of reaching 50 episodes, I will be counting down my personal favorite horror films. With the last list, I talked about some of the recent horror films I had seen, and this list will be focusing on some of the goofier movies that I personally enjoy. Movies that fall into the category of so bad they're good, or some that have goofy titles and moments in them. I should mention that these movies aren't in any particular order, and just happen to fall into this order out of how often I watch them. So without further ado, let's continue with the list. Number 40. Leprechaun 3. Kicking off this list is the third movie of the Leprechaun series, the movie that stars Warwick Davis as a killer leprechaun. This movie follows the leprechaun as he ends up in Las Vegas, where he terrifies a casino with his regular antics in order to find his pot of gold. Many fans of the franchise consider this to be the best in the series, and it's not hard to see why, with Warwick having a blast playing the main villain and having him set in the one place a leprechaun would feel right at home. The kills are some of the best in the series, with the best comedic moments of the franchise, and even though the first movie did have a slightly better cast in the first movie, you can tell these actors were having fun. While not the greatest movie of all time, the energy this movie gives off just puts a smile on my face, and I always look forward to watching it every St. Paddy's Day. Number 39. Wolf Cop. The movie follows a drunk cop who one night ends up turning into a werewolf through an occult ritual and goes around killing all of the scumbags of his town. This is the kind of dumb movie that I miss seeing in the modern day, as the plot is so bonkers that it puts a smile on my face. The practical effects for the Wolf Cop are some of the best I've ever seen given this film's low budget. On top of the great effects, the writing is some of the funniest I've ever seen, with how the main character goes from a drunk, lazy cop to a hilarious, no-nonsense, tough werewolf, which I just adore. I haven't seen the sequel to this movie yet, but if it's anything like the first movie, I know I'll love that one too. Plus, the film was shot near my hometown, so it's nice to have some Canadian support. Number 38. Carved, the Slit-Mouthed Woman. One of Japan's most unique monster films, the movie tells the story of a woman in a trench coat and mask that is going around killing children, and it's up to a school teacher to discover who or what is killing these children. The thing about this movie that I like is taking an existing and popular monster in Japan, the Kuchisaka Onna, and turning it into a slasher villain with a dark and terrifying edge that I dare not spoil for those who haven't seen the movie. The characters are also very likable, with the main teacher having been affected by the monster and one of his students' mothers possibly becoming the next victim of the monster. There was a sequel to the movie, but sadly I've not been able to find, so I can only recommend this movie to those who are interested in a slasher plot, but with an interesting mystery and twist ending. Number 37. My Bloody Valentine. Another great Canadian-made slasher film, the movie is about a small town celebrating its first Valentine's Day after a serial killer's rampage and warning to never have another Valentine's party. But after 20 years of silence, it looks like the killer has returned to wreak havoc on the small town. The original movie is a slasher classic that has become more popular with the help of the restored cut that came out the same year as the much weaker remake. Yeah, sadly this was another movie that had several minutes cut due to the MPA forcing these scenes to be removed to keep it at an R-rated movie, which happened a lot with movies from the 80s to modern day. The main thing I love about this movie is the setting. Not many slasher films took advantage of their locations and would often be set in then modern day suburbia or in the woods to make the scares feel closer to home. But with a mining town, it made the movie much more creative on where the killer could hide and made the idea of the local legends seem more believable and down to earth than something like what Freddy was doing. While not one of the more marketable slasher films, this is one where I think more people should check out during the Valentine's Day season. Number 36. Tales of Halloween. One of the few modern-day horror films I actually like, the film is an anthology movie that takes the idea of the many things that happen on Halloween. Most of the stories focus on certain things that happen on Halloween in a small town with Adrienne Barbeau as our narrator. These stories range from disturbing and creepy urban legends to silly parodies of Brothers Grimm stories. With a great cast of both old and new horror actors, this takes a very EC Comics vibe and gives life to a bunch of stories that are hit or miss. Of the 10 stories in the anthology, about 8 of them are pretty good. Not as good as something like Creepshow or Cat's Eye, but does put a smile on my face whenever I watch this on Halloween night. Number 35. House. Another great Japanese horror film follows 7 girls who head to one of their friend's aunt's house for the summer, only to find out that it's haunted and that all of them are trapped in the house for the night. This movie was described as if Mario Bava directed an episode of Scooby-Doo, and that perfectly explains what this movie is. If I had to give my own description of the movie, imagine watching Who Framed Roger Rabbit while doing a combination of PSP and weed. Something that takes a generic and straightforward premise but throws in some wacky and somewhat disturbing imagery. A movie that is a combination of an art house movie along with the most bonkers and wildest side of horror you will ever see in your life, and I love it. Definitely worth renting if you have time or the energy to watch this bonkers horror film. Number 34. Maniac Cop. A slasher movie that has mostly fallen into obscurity follows an undead cop who goes out into the streets of New York seeking revenge on the city and people who wronged him in his previous life. The movie is definitely a product of the 80s, as you can tell that it tried to create a marketable monster with a unique look and style just like Jason or Freddy. Just like those movies, it does take a unique concept and has some pretty fun ways the cop kills people, like having a blade inside of his police baton. Plus, I love that the killer makes use of him being a cop to get away with these kills, making the city panic into thinking that any cop could be the killer. The cast is pretty impressive for how low budget the film is. You have actors like Tom Atkins, Richard Roundtree, and even Bruce Campbell was in this and the sequel. It's sad to see this movie go under the radar simply because people got tired of seeing these movies, even though it got 2 sequels. But it may be getting a remake and a TV series in the near future. Definitely check this series out, as it just got a really great Blu-ray release. You won't be disappointed. Number 33. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Do I even need to say anything about this movie? Literally, the moment you hear the title, you should know what you're in for. The movie is about a bunch of evil tomatoes going around killing people. This is the kind of movie you think about when you hear the term "so bad it's good." It comes with everything you want, from the jokes involving the heroes who try to fight against the tomatoes, the sound effects that were made for the tomatoes, even how they defeat the tomatoes is just so stupid, it's hilariously perfect. This movie has not just gained a cult following, but has become a cultural phenomenon, having 3 sequels, an animated TV series, comic books, several rip-offs, one of which I covered on this channel, even a series of video games on computers and the NES. It just goes to show that even the stupidest idea can leave a much longer lasting impression on the world than most people think, and it makes for some cheesy popcorn flick fun. Number 32. Jack Brooks' Monster Slayer. Another great Canadian B-movie, the movie follows a guy named Jack Brooks who was horribly scarred after his family was killed by a monster on a camping trip. I love this movie for the characters, as you can relate to Jack and understand the way he is and how he interacts with the people around him, especially his girlfriend and teacher, who's played by legendary horror icon Robert Englund. Plus, I love the practical effects in this movie and the monsters that are created for this movie, like the caveman-looking creature that killed Jack's family, the Cyclops-looking monster he fights in the opening and ending of the movie, and the giant Robert Englund tentacle monster. Yes, really. It really shows not just how creative the monsters look, but also the way they represent the different locations they come from, like Canada, Japan, and Africa. Plus, it's always nice to see Robert Englund in a role that isn't the giggling pizza-faced annoyance. Another great Canadian B movie that needs to get more attention. Number 31. The Car. Long before Christine came onto the scene, the 1970s brought us many films about the killer car. From Duel to my favorite killer car movie, aptly titled The Car. A movie about a small town having to try and figure out a series of murders being committed by a black car. The movie is a suspenseful mystery about why this car is killing people and how it might be connected to a much older and evil power. This cast is not the strongest, as the only two standout actors are James Brolin, the father of Josh Brolin, the actor who would go on to play Thanos in the MCU, and Kathleen Lloyd, who plays his girlfriend in the movie. The biggest reason to see this movie are the effects and the design of the car itself, which has led itself into becoming one of the most recognizable cars in movies and one many fans have wanted to restore. If you ever find this movie, I'd only recommend it to fans of the killer car genre or people who enjoy special effects, as there are other better killer car movies, but this one is still pretty good.